Respected friends, let me begin with a simple observation that took many people decades to learn the hard way. The world is full of noise, advice, reactions, and opinions, and most of them are offered without any cost to the person giving them. Yet every time you explain what you're doing, every time you announce your plans too early, you quietly hand over something valuable, your mental freedom. You invite judgment before results, distraction before clarity, and doubt before momentum has had a chance to do its work. There's a peculiar habit we're taught from a young age: to talk, to justify, to convince. We feel incomplete if people don't understand us. But wisdom often moves in the opposite direction. It moves quietly. It observes more than it speaks. It waits. The most effective people rarely feel the need to broadcast their intentions, not because they are secretive, but because they understand a simple truth: progress does not need applause, and plans do not need permission. Ladies and gentlemen, silence protects focus because attention is fragile, and the moment you expose your plans to the outside world, that attention begins to fracture. When you speak about what you are doing too early, you invite reactions that you did not ask for and often do not need. Some people will doubt you, some will discourage you in the name of concern, and some will offer advice that is based more on their fears than your reality. None of this information is neutral. Each comment, even well-intentioned, pulls your mind away from the work itself and forces you to process emotions, explanations, and justifications instead of progress. Silence removes this entire layer of interference and allows your thinking to remain clean, rational, and uninterrupted. Focus thrives in a quiet environment because deep work requires sustained mental effort. When your goals are private, you don't feel pressured to perform for an audience or rush results to prove something. You are free to think long-term, to change direction if needed, and to make mistakes without embarrassment. The moment others know what you are attempting, expectations appear. Those expectations subtly influence decisions, often pushing you towards safer, more visible actions rather than the smartest ones. Silence acts as a shield, keeping your decision-making process independent and grounded in logic rather than social pressure. Unnecessary interference rarely comes in dramatic forms. It shows up as casual questions, unsolicited advice, comparisons, and subtle judgment. A simple "how's that going?" can create stress where none existed. A passing comment can plant doubt that wasn't there before. Silence eliminates these mental landmines. When people don't know your plans, they can't interfere with them, and you are left alone with the most important voices, facts, reason, and your own judgment. There is also a psychological advantage to silence that few people recognize. Talking about goals creates a false sense of progress. The brain often confuses explanation with execution. You feel productive because you spoke, not because you acted. Silence removes this illusion. When you don't talk, the only way to feel progress is to actually make progress. This builds discipline and strengthens focus over time. Silence is not weakness, secrecy, or fear. It is a strategic choice to reduce noise and protect concentration. The most meaningful work is often invisible while it is being built. By staying quiet, you give yourself the space to think clearly, work steadily, and move forward without distraction, interruption, or unnecessary influence from people who are not responsible for the outcome. Ladies and gentlemen, when you choose to speak less about your actions and intentions, you shield yourself from the barrage of opinions that the world inevitably offers. It's important to recognize that most opinions are neither deeply considered nor grounded in reality. They are reactions fueled by emotion, bias, and a limited understanding of your circumstances. People often respond based on their own fears, insecurities, or aspirations, rather than any true insight into what you are doing. If you make the mistake of sharing your plans openly, you inadvertently invite commentary that can distract, discourage, or even derail your progress. These unsolicited judgments are not necessarily malicious, but they are often misaligned with your goals, and the noise they create can cloud your own judgment and resolve. Consider how frequently people feel compelled to give advice about things they have never personally tackled. The advice may be well-meaning, but it often reflects their own limitations and experiences rather than your reality. When you vocalize your plans or achievements, The world reacts through a filter of its own experiences, projecting assumptions onto your actions. Listening to every opinion risks allowing others to influence your path, subtly shifting your priorities to align with their expectations rather than your own. In contrast, when you maintain a disciplined silence about your endeavors, you preserve the purity of your focus. Your energy is not siphoned off by defending choices, explaining reasoning, or trying to convince skeptics. It remains entirely devoted to execution. Emotional reactions are contagious. Hearing criticism or doubt can trigger insecurity, self-questioning, or even premature changes in direction. By keeping your work and intentions private, you create a buffer against these emotional disturbances. The mind functions best when it operates with clarity and consistency, and external opinions often introduce confusion and second-guessing. The quieter presence regarding what you do, the more resilient your strategy becomes. You cultivate a mental environment where judgment and action are separated, allowing results to speak for themselves. Silence also nurtures patience, a quality frequently underestimated in the pursuit of success. When others are unaware of your plans, there is no pressure for immediate validation or acknowledgement. You can measure progress against your own standards, not the fluctuating opinions of others. This kind of self-reliance builds confidence that is rooted in competence rather than approval, and it develops an inner strength that is difficult to shake. Keeping your actions to yourself is not about secrecy for the sake of secrecy. It is a deliberate strategy that prioritizes clarity, focus, and control over the distractions of the external world. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a timeless truth in understanding that results carry far more weight than explanations ever could. When you achieve something meaningful, the outcome itself becomes evidence that needs no defense or justification. People may try to analyze, criticize, or interpret your actions, but tangible results are indisputable. They stand as a permanent record of what you were able to accomplish, unlike explanations, which are fleeting and often filtered through subjective perspectives. By focusing on results rather than talking about intentions, you allow your work to speak for itself, creating a clarity and authority that words alone can never achieve. Explanations, no matter how well-intentioned, are inherently fragile. They require constant context, persuasion, and reinforcement to be understood, and even then they are interpreted through the biases and assumptions of others. People hear what they want to hear, not necessarily what you say, and emotions or preconceptions often distort the message. When you rely on explanations to justify your actions, you subject yourself to the volatility of public perception. One misinterpreted statement or misunderstood plan can overshadow months or years of effort. In contrast, concrete results bypass this noise entirely. They are proof in the purest sense, observable and measurable. They are less vulnerable to distortion and less dependent on the fluctuating opinions of others. History repeatedly demonstrates that those who produce meaningful results quietly often gain far greater influence and respect than those who speak loudly about intentions. Patience becomes a critical ally in this process because it allows the fruits of effort to emerge in their own time without the interference of external commentary. People may doubt, question, or even ridicule while the work is in progress, but the eventual outcome validates the approach. This quiet confidence, rooted in action rather than explanation, creates a credibility that is nearly possible to challenge. The accumulation of results over time compounds, leaving a legacy that speaks volumes without a single unnecessary word. Furthermore, results tend to age better than explanations. Words can be forgotten, misquoted, or misunderstood, but achievements remain as a permanent testament to capability and judgment. They endure scrutiny, comparison, and time itself, proving their significance in a way that explanations rarely can. When you focus on performing rather than justifying, you cultivate a reputation based on substance rather than narrative. Others may speculate, but your results offer an unambiguous account of what is possible when disciplined effort, focus, and intelligence are applied consistently. Ladies and gentlemen, maintaining privacy in what you do is not merely a matter of secrecy. It is a strategic advantage that shapes your ability to act effectively, adapt quickly, and preserve your mental equilibrium. When people are unaware of your plans, intentions, or progress, you gain a kind of leverage that is rarely available to those who broadcast their every move. Others cannot influence your decisions, challenge your approach prematurely, or pressure you into actions that serve their interests rather than your own. This leverage allows you to make choices based solely on the realities of your situation, free from external noise, judgment, or interference. By keeping your work and strategy private, you retain control over timing, execution, and perception, which often proves far more valuable than immediate recognition or approval. Flexibility is a natural consequence of this discretion. When your actions and plans are visible to everyone, you become bound by expectations, opinions, and social pressure. Changes in strategy may be questioned, and even small adjustments can be misinterpreted as inconsistency or failure. Privacy, on the other hand, gives you the freedom to pivot, iterate, and refine your approach without fear of scrutiny. You can experiment quietly, test ideas, and respond to unforeseen challenges without needing to justify every step. This adaptability often determines the difference between success and stagnation because it allows you to operate on your terms, with agility and precision, rather than under the gaze of others who may not understand the full context. Perhaps the most understated benefit of maintaining privacy is the peace of mind it provides. Human attention is a limited resource, and constant engagement with the judgments, advice, or critiques of others can be draining. By controlling what information you share, you reduce unnecessary emotional labor and protect yourself from distractions that do not contribute to your goals. A mind unburdened by external noise can focus entirely on creation, execution, and improvement. This inner calm is not just a mental comfort. It is a productivity multiplier, allowing clearer thinking, better decision-making, and more consistent performance. Privacy also preserves relationships and reputations in subtle but powerful ways. When others cannot attach themselves prematurely to your success or misinterpret your intentions, you retain the ability to manage perceptions thoughtfully, revealing your accomplishments on your own terms. The combination of leverage, flexibility, and mental clarity creates a framework in which long-term success is more achievable, and the journey toward your objectives is less encumbered by unnecessary friction. In essence, privacy is a form of self-discipline and strategic intelligence that multiplies your effectiveness, allowing you to act decisively, adapt swiftly, and maintain composure under pressure. Ladies and gentlemen, every moment spent explaining your actions, intentions, or decisions is a moment taken from actually doing the work that matters. Talking about what you plan to achieve or justifying your approach consumes mental and emotional energy, which is a finite resource. When you divert attention toward persuading others, defending choices, or clarifying misunderstandings, you are essentially transferring time and focus from productive execution to managing perception. This is not just a minor inefficiency. It can become a critical drain that slows progress, erodes momentum, and undermines the discipline required to achieve meaningful results. Execution requires full attention, clarity, and sustained effort, all of which are diminished when energy is spent explaining instead of acting. The human mind has a limited capacity for focused work. When you engage in explanations, you introduce friction and distraction, forcing your brain to shift between tasks, articulating ideas, anticipating objections, and navigating social responses, rather than concentrating on the steps that directly move your objectives forward. This cognitive load can lead to mistakes, delays, and even self-doubt, because part of your mental bandwidth is constantly tied up in external management rather than internal progress. The result is that time which could have been used for meaningful action is instead absorbed by a process that often produces little tangible value. Furthermore, explanations rarely have the lasting impact that results do. While words are fleeting, outcomes are concrete, observable, and difficult to contest. Excessive explanation can create an illusion of progress, as you feel productive in defending or rationalizing your choices, but this rarely translates into real-world advancement. In contrast, focusing energy on execution ensures that every effort contributes directly to measurable improvement, skill development, or achievement. The discipline to act quietly without broadcasting intentions or defending decisions fosters a momentum that compounds over time and gradually yields undeniable results. Excessive explanation also exposes you to unnecessary scrutiny, criticism, and the influence of others who may not understand your objectives. Each justification becomes a potential entry point for doubt, disagreement, or persuasion, which can subtly alter your path or diminish confidence. By minimizing this exposure and reserving your energy for actual work, you protect both your progress and your resolve. Execution thrives in an environment of focus, autonomy, and uninterrupted attention, all of which are eroded when explanation takes precedence over action. Ultimately, the choice to act first and explain later, or not at all, maximizes efficiency, preserves energy, and enhances effectiveness. By keeping your focus firmly on execution, you create a rhythm of productivity where each step builds on the previous one. Results accumulate naturally, and your work speaks for itself without the need for justification.